I never imagined my own grandson could humiliate me like that. He threw a garbage bag at me, told me to leave, and slammed the door. My heart was breaking, and I thought I'd lost him forever. But when I opened that bag, I found $425,000 and a letter that changed everything I thought I knew about him and about myself. Before I begin, if you've ever lived through betrayal like this, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my YouTube. I still remember the morning as if it happened yesterday. The sun was barely up, spilling a soft gold across the kitchen floor, and I had made my way over to my grandson's apartment with a small box of his favorite breakfast pastries. I had been visiting him less often lately. He had been distant for months, but I told myself today would be different. Maybe today we could talk. Maybe today we could bridge the growing silence between us. I knocked on the door gently, the smell of freshly baked cinnamon rolls tucked under my arm, and called out, "Good morning, sweetie. I brought something for you." There was no response at first. Then the door creaked open just a little, and I saw him standing there, a scowl on his face, the same face I remembered as a toddler clinging to my skirts. My heart sank. Something was wrong. Before I could step in, he yanked the door open fully, his eyes flashing with anger I didn't understand. "Grandma, just leave," he snapped. My hands tightened around the box, unsure whether to fight or retreat. I just came to visit," I whispered, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. Instead, without a word, he grabbed a large black garbage bag from the corner of the room, shoved it toward me, and literally threw it at my feet. It fell with a heavy thud, rolling slightly toward the door. The humiliation hit me like a wave. My chest tightened, tears threatening to spill over. The neighbors in the hallway might have heard, might have seen. My grandson, my own grandson, had just treated me like trash. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but the words wouldn't come. I could only stand there, clutching my pastries, staring at that black bag as he slammed the door shut in my face. The sound of the lock clicking echoed in my ears, louder than any shouting. I walked down the hallway slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. People passed by, some glancing at me, probably thinking I had lost my mind, and I didn't stop to explain. My mind was racing. Had I done something wrong? Had I said something to upset him? For months he had been withdrawn, curt, and sometimes even rude over the phone, but I never imagined it would escalate like this. I sat on a bench in the small park across the street, staring at the bag lying by my feet. It seemed impossibly heavy. For a while, I just let the tears fall, feeling the sting of betrayal and the bitter taste of confusion. How could a child I had raised, held close every night, and loved unconditionally treat me with such contempt? My knees shook, and I felt older than I had ever felt in my life. Finally, after what felt like hours, I mustered the courage to pick up the bag and drag it back to my car. I didn't know why I hadn't opened it right there, why I had left it in the trunk for the next several hours, but I think part of me wasn't ready for whatever it might hold. I told myself I would do it at home, in the safety of my kitchen, with the door locked and the lights on, where no one could see the trembling hands of a grandmother betrayed. When I finally lifted the bag onto the counter and unzipped it, I braced myself. Old clothes, some discarded trinkets, something I had given him and he no longer wanted, but nothing could have prepared me for what was inside. Cash, stacks of crisp bills, neatly bundled, enough to make my head spin. And then I saw it, a letter resting on top of the pile, the handwriting unmistakably his. I sat down immediately, clutching the letter as if it were a lifeline. My hands shook, not with fear now, but with a mix of confusion and disbelief. $425,000! How? Why? What did this mean? And why would he, my grandson, the one who had just hurled me out like garbage, leave something like this in a bag meant to humiliate me? My mind raced through every possibility, each more heartbreaking and more shocking than the last. I unfolded the letter carefully. The words on the page almost made me cry instantly. He explained everything, every harsh word, every cold look, every angry outburst. He had been trying to protect me. The money wasn't just cash. It was the culmination of years of secret work, savings, and sacrifices he had made because he didn't want me to struggle in my retirement. He had been embarrassed by his own inability to explain it without being misunderstood. The garbage bag, the anger, the door slamming, it had all been a ruse, a performance he thought would keep me at a safe distance until he could give me this. My knees buckled. The anger I had felt toward him, the humiliation, the grief, it all collided with a wave of guilt and awe. My grandson, my beloved grandson, had been carrying this burden in silence. He had wanted to shock me, to make me feel the hurt I might have felt, to prepare me for the truth of his intentions. And in doing so, he had broken my heart in ways I could barely articulate. Sitting there, tears streaming down my face, I understood finally that love sometimes wears a harsh mask, sacrifice sometimes speaks in the language of anger, and pride often keeps us from seeing the truth right in front of our eyes. I held the letter to my chest, feeling the weight of both the money and the revelation. I had been humiliated, yes, but I had also been shown the depths of my grandson's love in a way I would never forget. For hours, I just sat in the quiet of my kitchen, staring at that bag and that letter. The world outside seemed distant, almost unreal. I realized that life had a way of teaching lessons we never expected, and often in ways that hurt us the most before giving us the gift of understanding. That day, I felt the full range of human emotion: shame, grief, disbelief, love, and finally, forgiveness. And in that forgiveness, I found peace. The days after I discovered the bag and the letter were strange and quiet, almost surreal. I couldn't stop thinking about my grandson, about that moment when he had hurled the bag at me, and how it all made sense now. Every flash of anger, every slammed door, every cold stare, it had all been a part of his plan. And yet, even knowing that, my heart still ached. Not for the humiliation, but for the years of misunderstanding between us. How many times had I thought he resented me when in truth he had been carrying this burden silently? I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in my favorite chair, the letter clutched in my hands, reading and rereading his words. He had explained that the money came from years of saving in secret, side jobs and wise investments he didn't want me to worry about or interfere with. He had seen me struggle, seen me worry about bills, and wanted to ensure my comfort for the rest of my life. And yet, he had chosen such a cruel way to show it. The next morning, I knew I had to call him, but the thought made my chest twist. What would I say? Thank you for humiliating me? It felt absurd, but I also knew I couldn't keep this a secret or let the moment pass without acknowledgement. I picked up the phone and stared at his number for what felt like 10 minutes, my thumb hovering over the call button. Finally, I pressed it, hearing the dial tone with a mix of anxiety and hope. "Hello?" His voice was cautious, wary. There was still a trace of tension, like he was bracing for a fight. "Sweetie, it's me," I said softly, my voice shaking. I read your letter." There was a pause. I could hear him breathe, like he wasn't sure whether to be relieved or defensive. You did?" he asked finally, almost whispering. "Yes," I said. "I understand now. I see why you did what you did, and I want you to know I forgive you. I'm proud of you, and I love you." My voice broke on the last word. There was silence for a long moment. Then, finally, he whispered, "Grandma, I was so afraid you'd hate me forever. I thought if I pushed you away, made you angry, maybe it would protect you from me failing somehow." I felt tears fill my eyes again. Sweetheart, you could never fail me. You've already given me the greatest gift, your heart. That's all I've ever wanted. After that call, we began to talk more openly than we had in years. Slowly, the tension between us began to melt. He told me about the pressures he had been under at work, the secret investments he had kept hidden. I told him about my loneliness, my fears, the moments I had wondered if he even wanted me in his life. For the first time in a long time, we were honest with each other, and it felt like sunlight breaking through a long, cold winter. But the bag, the money, and the letter still weighed heavily on me. I couldn't stop thinking about how carefully he had planned everything, how he had risked my heartbreak to give me this gift. It made me reflect on my own life, on the times I had misunderstood people I loved, judging them for actions that had hidden meaning. How many relationships had I allowed to fray because I failed to look beyond the surface? I realized that love isn't always gentle. Sometimes it's messy, confusing, and even painful, but that doesn't make it any less real. I decided to take a walk one evening, carrying a small portion of the money in my purse. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I wanted to think clearly. The air was crisp, the sky painted in shades of pink and orange, and as I walked through the quiet streets, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I thought about the sacrifices my grandson had made, and I felt both pride and a pang of guilt. Pride that he had grown up into such a thoughtful, careful young man. Guilt that I had ever doubted him, even for a moment. When I returned home, I placed the money in a small safe I had bought years ago, the kind you keep in a closet, hidden from view. I didn't want it to become a source of temptation or stress for him or for me. The letter, however, I kept on my bedside table. I read it nearly every night, finding something new each time, a phrase, a memory, a hidden meaning in his words. It became my connection to him, a reminder of the depth of love and sacrifice that often goes unrecognized. A week later, I invited him over. He was nervous, unsure if I was still upset or if our relationship could be repaired. I smiled as I opened the door, and for the first time in months, we hugged. Long, awkward, but deeply heartfelt. There were tears, laughter, and even apologies on both sides. And in that moment, I knew we had crossed a threshold, leaving the pain behind while carrying the lessons forward. Over the following months, our relationship grew stronger than it had ever been. We cooked together, shared stories, and even planned a small trip, just the two of us. The money, once a source of shock, became a tool to help me secure my comfort and also support small dreams we had talked about quietly. Fixing up my little garden, taking a weekend getaway, donating to causes we both cared about. But more than that, it reminded us that even when love seems hidden behind anger or pride, it's still there, quietly waiting for recognition. One afternoon, as we sat together sorting through old family photos, he turned to me and said, "Grandma, I know I scared you, but I wanted to make sure you knew I'll always do everything I can for you. I may not always show it in the right way, but you're my world." I hugged him tightly, tears streaming again, but this time they were tears of relief and joy. "And you're mine, always." That black garbage bag, the act that had hurt me so deeply, became a symbol of everything I had learned about love, sacrifice, and human complexity. It taught me that sometimes the people we love most express that love in ways we might not understand at first. And sometimes we must endure heartbreak to see the truth that has been there all along. I still look at that letter every now and then, feeling a deep connection to my grandson and a profound sense of gratitude for life's unexpected lessons. The $425,000 was significant, yes, but the true gift was the bridge rebuilt between us, the trust, understanding, and unspoken bond that had survived humiliation, anger, and distance. And now, whenever someone asks me about that day, I don't tell them about the garbage bag or the shock or the anger. I tell them about the love behind it, the letter, and the realization that even in the moments that hurt us most, life holds the deepest lessons about forgiveness, understanding, and family. Before I continue, if you've ever felt misunderstood by someone you love, please leave a comment, and subscribe to my YouTube. Even after the initial shock of finding the money and reading the letter, I couldn't shake the memory of that morning, the sound of the bag hitting the floor, the slam of the door, and the look in my grandson's eyes. There was hurt there, yes, but there was also something I hadn't noticed at the time: fear. He had been afraid that I wouldn't understand, afraid that his efforts might fail, afraid that the very thing he intended to do for my well-being would push me away forever. And in that fear, he had acted in a way that seemed cruel, but was really born out of love. I spent a lot of time reflecting on my own actions and assumptions. How many times had I judged my grandson harshly? How many times had I assumed anger meant resentment, silence meant apathy, or distance meant hatred? I realized that part of the misunderstanding between us came from my inability to see his struggles from his perspective. I had assumed, as many of us do with those we love, that our love and care were always obvious. But sometimes the people closest to us carry burdens silently, expressing love in ways that are indirect, even painful. It took a while before I felt ready to open up to him fully about how hurt I had been. One evening, after a quiet dinner together, I sat him down in the living room, the soft hum of the heater filling the space, and I spoke from the heart. "I want you to know," I said gently, "that when you threw that bag at me, it broke me. But now I understand. I understand the love behind it, even if I didn't see it at the time." He looked at me, his eyes wide, a mixture of relief and guilt washing over his face. "Grandma, I was so scared. I didn't know how else to make you see without scaring you away completely. I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," I said softly, taking his hand in mine, "and I forgive you. More than that, I want you to know that I see you. I see all the sacrifices you've made, and I'm proud of you." That night, we talked for hours. He shared stories of his life, things he had kept hidden, fears he had carried, and ways he had tried to make things easier for me without making me feel burdened. I shared my own experiences, my own fears, and the loneliness I sometimes felt. And for the first time in a long time, we both listened, not just hearing each other's words, but feeling them. In the weeks that followed, we began to rebuild our connection in small, meaningful ways. I started visiting him more often, not as a guest bearing pastries, but as someone who truly wanted to share life with him. We cooked together, sometimes laughing at our mistakes, sometimes sharing quiet moments of reflection. I discovered a side of him I had never fully appreciated: the care he took in even the smallest details, the thoughtfulness behind his actions, and the immense love he held for our family, even when it was expressed in ways that seemed harsh. The bag, the money, and the letter became more than just a shocking revelation. They became a turning point in our relationship. I realized that sometimes love doesn't announce itself with fanfare or gentle gestures. Sometimes it comes wrapped in misunderstanding, disguised as anger, and hidden behind actions that seem inexplicable until you take the time to understand the person behind them. One afternoon, while organizing my home office, I found myself thinking about the future. The money, once a symbol of shock and confusion, now felt like a tool, a means to support my needs, yes, but also to create opportunities for joy and growth. I decided to use a portion of it to improve my home, making it safer and more comfortable, but also to create a small space where my grandson and I could spend time together, a place for laughter, reflection, and storytelling. We even began planning small trips, weekend getaways to quiet places where we could reconnect with nature, away from the noise and distractions of daily life. Each trip became a reminder that relationships, even when strained, can be nurtured and strengthened with patience, understanding, and open hearts. But more than the money or the trips, what mattered most was the bond we rebuilt. I realized that forgiveness is not just an action, it is a process, a journey of understanding, empathy, and grace. By forgiving him, I freed both of us from the weight of misunderstanding. By listening and truly seeing him, I allowed him to be vulnerable, to show me his love in ways I had never imagined. One evening, as we sat together reviewing old family albums, he paused on a photograph of me holding him as a baby. "Grandma, I've always loved you, even when I acted out. Even when I seemed angry, I was just trying to protect you from worrying about me. I never wanted to hurt you." I felt tears fill my eyes. "And I've always loved you too," I whispered, "even when I didn't understand, even when I thought you were pushing me away, my love never wavered." It struck me then how fragile and beautiful the human heart is. How easily misunderstanding can grow into resentment, and yet how quickly it can dissolve in the presence of honesty, empathy, and courage. The bag, the money, and the letter were symbols of that fragile beauty, a reminder that even the most painful moments can lead to deeper understanding and connection. Over time, I began to share our story with close friends and family, not to shock or impress, but to illustrate a truth I had learned in the most difficult way. Love is rarely simple, and understanding often requires patience, humility, and the willingness to see beyond appearances. I wanted people to know sometimes the ones we think have hurt us the most are actually carrying love in ways we may never fully comprehend without taking the time to listen and understand. And so life went on, slower, richer, and more meaningful than before. I found joy in the small things, cooking together, sharing stories, laughing at minor mishaps, and simply being present with each other. The money, while significant, became secondary to the emotional wealth we had created. The bond, the understanding, the mutual respect, and the love that survived confusion and distance. I often think back to that morning, to the shock, the humiliation, the confusion, and the heartbreak, and I realize now that without that painful moment, without the bag, the slam of the door, and the harshness of his actions, I might never have seen the depth of his love. Sometimes the lessons life teaches us come wrapped in difficulty, and sometimes the people we love express that love in ways that challenge us to grow, to forgive, and to understand. Before I continue, if you've ever felt like someone you love acted in ways you couldn't understand, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my YouTube. The weeks after our reconciliation passed quietly, but they were filled with small, powerful moments that I began to cherish more than anything else. I remember one afternoon, sitting in the sunlit kitchen, my grandson humming softly as he washed dishes. I was folding laundry nearby, and the sound of him moving around the room felt ordinary, yet comforting. It was ordinary life, the kind we often take for granted, but after everything that had happened, every simple act became precious. I kept thinking about that letter, how carefully he had written it, choosing words that were honest but gentle, meant to convey both love and explanation. He had poured himself onto the page, revealing truths he couldn't speak aloud in person without fear of miscommunication. That letter had been his way of bridging the gap, and it had worked. It reminded me that sometimes the most meaningful conversations aren't spoken. They're written, held, and revisited until the lessons sink in. One evening, we decided to go through some old boxes in the attic, things I had stored for years, thinking they were memories too precious to part with. As we sorted through faded photographs, school papers, and little trinkets, I noticed him pause in front of a small, dusty wooden box. He looked at me, hesitated, and then slowly opened it. Inside were a few childhood toys, a worn-out blanket, and a collection of letters I had written him over the years, letters I hadn't even remembered sending. He picked one up and smiled, reading aloud a passage where I had written about my hopes for him, my dreams for his future, and my unwavering love. "Grandma," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "I never stopped keeping these. I've read them many times when I felt unsure of myself." I felt a lump in my throat. "Oh, sweetheart, I had no idea," I whispered. "I didn't know you held on to them." He hugged the box to his chest, and I realized that this was the first time I truly understood him, not just the adult he had become, but the little boy I had raised, the child who had carried both love and fear in equal measure. That box, those letters, they were proof that our bond had never truly been broken, even when it had felt like it. In the weeks that followed, I found myself thinking more deeply about the way we express love. My grandson had chosen a path that seemed harsh, even cruel, but in the end, it was his way of protecting both of us. It made me reflect on my own life, on the times I had misjudged others, assumed the worst, or failed to recognize the hidden intentions behind their actions. I realized that love isn't always gentle, and sacrifice often comes in forms we don't expect. One afternoon, he asked me to help him with a small home project, fixing a wobbly table in his living room. We worked together, measuring, hammering, and laughing when things didn't go as planned. I watched him carefully, noticing the patience in his movements, the care with which he handled the tools. And I thought about that bag, the letter, and the money, the lengths he had gone to ensure my comfort, the depth of thought behind what seemed like cruelty. After we finished, we sat down on the couch, tired but satisfied. He looked at me and said, "Grandma, I know I scared you, and I know I hurt you, but I want you to know everything I did, every choice I made, was because I wanted to make your life better. I love you more than I can say." I reached out and held his hand, feeling the warmth and strength in it. "I know," I said softly, "and I love you too, more than you'll ever know." That night I went to bed feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The house was quiet, but not lonely. I thought about the journey we had taken, from misunderstanding and humiliation to revelation and reconciliation. I thought about the lessons I had learned, that love can be expressed in ways we might not recognize, that sacrifice often hides behind actions we misunderstand, and that forgiveness isn't just about absolving others, but about freeing ourselves from the weight of anger and resentment. In the days that followed, I made a point of cherishing every moment with him. We cooked together, shared quiet evenings talking about life, and even started planning a small trip to the countryside, a place we could go to reconnect with nature and with each other. Each moment became a reminder that relationships, even those tested by misunderstanding and distance, can be nurtured and healed with patience, empathy, and honesty. One afternoon, as I was preparing tea, he came up behind me and gently placed his hands on my shoulders. "Grandma," he said, "I want you to know something. That bag, that letter, the money, it wasn't just about keeping you safe or comfortable. It was about trust. I wanted to show you that you could trust me even when it seemed like I was pushing you away." I turned to him, tears welling in my eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, I trust you. I always have. And now I understand why you did what you did. It wasn't anger, it was love. And love, even when it hurts, is still love." He smiled, a mix of relief and happiness spreading across his face. "Thank you, Grandma. That means more to me than anything else." As I watched him walk away, I realized something profound. Our relationship had been transformed not by the money or the shock of the bag, but by the willingness to see each other's hearts, to understand the sacrifices and intentions behind actions that initially seemed cruel. That understanding had bridged a gap I thought might never be crossed. And in that quiet, sunlit kitchen, surrounded by the ordinary sounds of life, clinking dishes, the hum of the refrigerator, the rustle of papers, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for my grandson, for the lessons he had taught me, and for the unexpected journey that had brought us closer than ever. Before I continue, if you've ever struggled to understand someone you love, please leave a comment, and subscribe to my YouTube. In the weeks that followed, life seemed quieter, yet somehow fuller. I found myself noticing details I had overlooked before. The way my grandson would hum quietly while reading, the careful way he prepared his meals, the small, almost invisible gestures that showed his thoughtfulness. The more I observed, the more I realized how often I had misread him in the past, assuming impatience or anger where there had only been care and concern. It made me think about all the times I had judged others too quickly, about the walls we all build around ourselves, and the ways love can hide in plain sight. One morning, I decided to sort through the cash in the bag, not because I was curious about the exact amount anymore, but because I wanted to understand the full extent of his efforts. I had always known he was diligent, but seeing the stacks of bills organized with precision, each bundle carefully labeled, made me pause. He had saved every penny with purpose, planning years ahead, thinking about my comfort and security. He had carried this secret alone through countless days and nights just so I wouldn't worry. And yet, in order to deliver it to me, he had risked breaking my heart. I realized then that the letter and the money were inseparable. One was a declaration of intent, the other a tangible expression of love and care, and both had been hidden behind a veil of fear and pride. My grandson had acted out of a desire to protect me, but in doing so, he had also taught me one of the most important lessons of my life. Love is not always obvious, and sacrifice is not always gentle. That afternoon, I called him over. I wanted to do something meaningful, a small gesture to show him that I had understood and appreciated everything. I didn't plan a big event or lavish gift. Instead, I asked him to sit with me in the garden, a place where we had spent countless hours together during my younger days. The sun was warm on our faces, and the garden smelled of blooming jasmine and fresh earth. I handed him a small notebook. "Here," I said softly, "I want you to write down everything you feel, everything you want me to know, without fear. You don't have to hide behind anger, pride, or fear anymore. This is just for us." He looked at me, startled at first, then slowly accepted the notebook. He hesitated, then began writing. I watched as the pen moved across the page, carefully, deliberately, and I felt a connection to him I hadn't felt before, deeper than ever, built on trust, honesty, and understanding. I realized that this moment, like the morning with the bag, was another turning point. But this time, it wasn't painful. This time, it was healing. As he wrote, I thought about the future. I wanted him to know that no matter what challenges came, no matter how far apart life might take us, we could always find a way back to each other. I thought about the lessons I had learned, patience, forgiveness, and the quiet power of seeing someone fully, beyond anger, beyond misunderstanding. I realized that relationships require effort, empathy, and sometimes enduring discomfort to uncover the deeper truths that bind us. When he finished, he handed the notebook to me. I read it slowly, savoring each word, each sentiment carefully placed. He wrote about his fears, his love for me, his regrets over the way he had acted, and his hopes for the future. And finally, at the end, he wrote, "Grandma, I love you. I always have, and I hope one day you can see that even when I hurt you, my heart was always with you." I felt tears stream down my face. I hugged him tightly, holding him as if I might never let go. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered, "I see it now. I always have, and I love you more than words can ever say." In the days that followed, our bond continued to grow stronger. We laughed together, shared quiet moments, and even began planning small projects around his apartment, fixing shelves, painting walls, and organizing the space to make it more welcoming. Each act, however ordinary, felt profound. Every shared task became a symbol of our renewed connection, a reminder that love often shows itself in small, deliberate actions rather than grand gestures. I also decided to use some of the money he had given me to make a few changes in my own life. I hired a local gardener to help care for my yard, fixed up a leaky roof that had been bothering me for years, and even treated myself to a few small pleasures I had denied myself, things that seemed trivial but brought immense joy. And yet, even as I spent the money, I realized its true value wasn't in what it could buy, but in what it represented. The depth of his love, the care he had taken, and the lengths he had gone to ensure my well-being. One evening, as we sat together watching the sunset, he turned to me and said, "Grandma, I know it may have seemed harsh the way I acted that morning, but I wanted you to know I could never hurt you. I only wanted to make sure you were safe, comfortable, and cared for." I took his hand in mine, feeling the warmth and strength of his grip. "I know now," I said softly, "and I understand. That morning was painful, yes, but it taught me something I never would have learned otherwise. It showed me the depth of your love, your thoughtfulness, and your willingness to sacrifice for me, and for that, I will always be grateful." We sat together in silence for a while, the sky painted in soft oranges and pinks, feeling the quiet contentment that comes from understanding and forgiveness. I realized then that life is full of moments like these, moments that seem small, ordinary, or even painful at first, but which carry profound lessons if we are willing to see them. And as I looked at him, my beloved grandson, I felt a deep sense of peace. The anger, humiliation, and confusion of that morning had faded, replaced by trust, understanding, and love. The bag, the money, the letter, they were all part of a journey that had brought us closer than ever, teaching me lessons about patience, empathy, and the profound ways love can express itself. That night, I went to bed with a heart full of gratitude. I thought about how easily relationships can fray when we misinterpret actions, fail to communicate, or judge too quickly. But I also thought about the beauty of reconciliation, the power of forgiveness, and the profound connections that can be rebuilt when we take the time to truly see one another. And as I drifted off to sleep, I whispered a quiet prayer of thanks for my grandson, for the lessons of that difficult morning, and for the enduring power of love, patience, and understanding. Before I continue, if you've ever felt hurt by someone you love, but later discovered their actions came from a place of care, please leave a comment, and subscribe to my YouTube. Life settled into a quiet rhythm after that. My grandson and I had developed a routine, one that was simple but filled with meaning. Mornings began with shared coffee, sometimes in companionable silence, sometimes with laughter spilling over small stories from his day or mine. Evenings were spent reading together, sorting through photos, or working on small household projects. These were ordinary acts, yet they became extraordinary to me because they were built on a foundation of trust, understanding, and love, things I had feared were lost forever. One weekend, he suggested we go through some old family memorabilia he had kept tucked away. "I've been holding on to things you might like to see," he said, a slight nervousness in his voice. We carried boxes into the living room and began sorting through them. There were photographs of birthdays, family holidays, and candid snapshots of me holding him as a baby, his tiny hands gripping my fingers. There were school awards, letters I had written him as a child, and even a few drawings he had made in kindergarten. As we sorted, he paused on a photograph of the two of us in the park, his small frame leaning against me while we fed the ducks. "I remember this day," he said softly, his voice almost a whisper. "I was so scared of everything back then, but you made me feel safe." I smiled, a warmth spreading through me. "And I will always want you to feel safe. Even now, even as we grow older, that will never change." He looked down, tracing the edge of the photo with his finger. "I think that's why I acted the way I did with the bag," he admitted quietly. "I wanted to make sure you'd never worry about me or anything else. I thought maybe if I scared you, I could protect you in my own way." I felt a lump in my throat. "Sweetheart, you scared me, yes, but it also taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn, that love is sometimes hidden behind fear, anger, or even harsh actions, and I understand that now." There was a long pause, the kind that isn't awkward but full of unspoken understanding. I watched him carefully, noticing how he had grown into a man who carried the weight of responsibility and love simultaneously. He had been a child once, learning how to navigate the world, and now he was an adult, still trying to protect those he cared about, even when it meant causing temporary pain. A few days later, I decided to take him out for a quiet afternoon drive. We didn't talk much at first, just enjoyed the calm rhythm of the car and the gentle hum of the road beneath us. Eventually, he broke the silence. "Grandma, I know that morning with the bag probably changed the way you see me," he said cautiously. I reached over and took his hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "It did," I admitted, "but not in a bad way. It changed how I understand you. It made me realize how much you love me, even when your actions seem confusing or harsh. That day I learned more about you and about love than I ever expected." He exhaled, relief washing over his face. "I was so afraid you'd never forgive me." I smiled softly. "Sweetheart, forgiveness isn't something I offer lightly, but I see now that your intentions were pure, and I forgive you not just for that day, but for all the misunderstandings that came before. I want us to move forward without carrying the weight of old mistakes." We drove in comfortable silence after that, the kind of silence that isn't empty, but full of connection. I felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that our relationship had been transformed not by money, not by shock, but by honesty, understanding, and the courage to reveal the heart behind the actions. Back home, I began thinking about what I could do to honor the lessons I had learned. The money in the bag was still there, tucked safely in my home, but I realized its true value wasn't in the bills themselves. It was in the story it told, the sacrifices it represented, and the love it symbolized. I wanted to use it in ways that would bring lasting joy, not just for me, but for both of us. We decided together to use a portion to renovate a small room in my apartment, a space where we could spend quiet afternoons together, read, write, or just relax. We painted the walls a soft, calming blue and added shelves to hold our favorite books, photographs, and keepsakes. Each item we placed in that room carried a memory, a story, or a lesson, turning the space into more than just a room. It became a symbol of our renewed bond and shared life. One evening, as we were arranging books on the shelf, he turned to me with a hesitant expression. "Grandma, I want to tell you something else," he said. "That morning with the bag, it wasn't just about the money or the letter. I wanted you to see that I could take responsibility for my actions, that I could be honest, even if it hurt at first. I wanted to prove to you that you could trust me completely." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, you've already done that. Trust isn't something I give lightly, but you've earned it 100 times over. That morning may have been painful, but it revealed your heart, and that's the greatest gift you could ever give me." We hugged then, a long, quiet embrace filled with gratitude, understanding, and the love that had always existed beneath the surface. I realized in that moment that sometimes the most meaningful lessons come wrapped in hardship, and sometimes the people we love express their care in ways we don't immediately recognize. In the days that followed, we continued to strengthen our bond. We cooked together, laughed at small mistakes, and even began planning a short trip to a nearby town we had both wanted to visit. Each shared experience became a reminder that relationships, even those tested by misunderstanding, can heal and grow stronger with patience, empathy, and honest communication. And as I watched him one afternoon, carefully tending to a plant we had rescued from the street, I realized that the bag, the money, and the letter were more than just a shocking gift. They were a catalyst. They forced us both to confront our assumptions, communicate openly, and rebuild the trust that had always been there, but had been buried under fear and misunderstanding. That night, as I sat by the window watching the stars, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. I was grateful for my grandson, for his courage, and for the lessons that painful morning had taught me. I understood now that love is rarely simple. It can be messy, confusing, and even painful at times. But if we take the time to see the heart behind the actions, it can be the most powerful, transformative force in our lives. Before I continue, if you've ever felt hurt by someone you love, but later discovered their intentions were pure, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my YouTube. The days that followed our reconciliation felt almost magical, though in a quiet, understated way. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic moments, just the soft, steady rhythm of life that I had longed for but had feared was lost forever. Mornings filled with shared coffee and conversation, afternoons spent tackling small projects, and evenings reading together or simply sitting in comfortable silence. I came to cherish these moments more than I had ever thought possible because they were real, grounded, and filled with love that had survived misunderstanding. One afternoon, he suggested we go through some of the old financial papers and letters that had been part of the bag. I hesitated at first, afraid that revisiting the money might bring back the memory of the humiliation, but he reassured me. "Grandma, I want us to understand everything together," he said softly. "I want you to see why I did what I did." We sat at the dining table, spreading out bundles of notes and receipts, and slowly, carefully, he explained how he had saved the money over the years. Every small side job, every cautious investment, every late night of research, it had all been for me, for my comfort, and for my future. He spoke quietly, almost reverently, as if admitting the truth of his actions out loud was both a relief and a vulnerability. As I listened, I felt a mixture of awe and remorse. Awe at the level of care he had poured into this secret, and remorse that I had ever doubted him, ever thought him unkind or uncaring. I realized that love often requires patience, the kind of patience that allows someone to act in ways that may be confusing or even painful, but which ultimately reveal their heart. After we finished sorting through the papers, he turned to me with a tentative expression. "Grandma, I know that morning with the bag hurt you deeply, and I'm sorry for that. But I hope you understand now that everything I did, every harsh word, every moment of seeming anger, was meant to protect you, to show you my love in a way I couldn't say out loud." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Sweetheart, I understand now, and I want you to know that I forgive you not just for that day, but for any misunderstanding we've had in the past. I see your heart, and I see your intentions, and I love you more than ever." In the following weeks, we began to plan small ways to celebrate our renewed bond. We started with something simple, a day trip to a nearby park where we walked quietly along the trails, talked about our dreams, and laughed at small memories from the past. It was ordinary, but it felt extraordinary. Every step, every word, every smile was infused with a depth of meaning that I hadn't experienced in years. During one of these walks, he paused and looked at me, his expression thoughtful. "Grandma," he said quietly, "I've been thinking. I want to make sure that you feel secure, not just now, but for the rest of your life. I want you to be happy without worrying about anything." I squeezed his hand gently. "Sweetheart, your actions have already shown me that. The money, the letter, the way you've cared, it all shows me your love. But happiness also comes from living fully, embracing life, and not holding on to fear or worry, and that's what I want for both of us." He nodded slowly, as if absorbing the full weight of my words. "I understand, Grandma. I want that too." In the following weeks, our relationship deepened in ways I hadn't imagined possible. We cooked together, shared quiet evenings reading, and even began working on small projects around his apartment. Each shared task, however mundane, became a symbol of connection, trust, and love. The money, once a source of shock and confusion, became a tool to improve our lives in small, meaningful ways. A renovated room for quiet moments, small trips we had dreamed of taking, and gestures of kindness to the people we loved. One evening, after a long day spent organizing photographs and letters, he turned to me with a tentative expression. "Grandma, I've been holding on to something else. I want you to know, truly, that I've always loved you. Even when I acted out, even when I seemed harsh, that love was always there." I felt tears welling in my eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, I've always known deep down, and now, seeing your heart, understanding your intentions, I love you more than ever." The truth is, that bag, the money, and the letter became more than just shocking discoveries. They became symbols of the strength and resilience of love. They reminded me that relationships, even when tested by misunderstanding or fear, can heal and grow stronger when we choose to see the heart behind the actions. A few weeks later, he suggested we create a memory book together, documenting our journey, the moments of misunderstanding, the letter, the discovery of the money, and the steps we had taken to rebuild our bond. I agreed immediately. We spent hours writing, sorting photographs, and sharing stories, laughing and crying together. That memory book became a tangible representation of our growth, our forgiveness, and our love, a testament to the resilience of family. One afternoon, as we added the final touches to the book, he looked at me and said, "Grandma, I know I hurt you, and I know it may have taken time for you to understand me, but I want you to know that I'll always do my best to show my love, even if I can't always find the perfect words." I hugged him tightly, feeling the warmth and strength of our connection. "Sweetheart, you've already done that, and I hope you know that I'll always be here, ready to understand, ready to forgive, and ready to love you unconditionally." In the quiet moments that followed, I reflected on how far we had come, from humiliation, confusion, and heartbreak to understanding, trust, and deep connection. It had been a journey I would never forget. The bag, the money, and the letter became catalysts, yes, but the true transformation came from our willingness to see each other fully, to communicate honestly, and to embrace the vulnerability that comes with love. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the lessons I had learned. I realized that love is rarely simple. It can be messy, confusing, and even painful at times, but it is also resilient, transformative, and capable of bridging even the deepest divides. And sometimes the people we love express that love in ways we may not immediately understand, but if we are patient and open-hearted, we can uncover the truth behind their actions. Before I continue, if you've ever had a relationship tested by misunderstanding and later rebuilt it stronger than ever, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my YouTube. Over the following months, my grandson and I grew even closer. What had begun as a tense, shocking encounter with a garbage bag now felt like a distant memory, replaced by laughter, shared stories, and a deep, quiet understanding. We had learned to communicate openly, to voice fears before they festered, and to recognize that love often hides in actions that may seem confusing at first glance. Every ordinary moment now felt extraordinary because it was shared with someone whose heart I finally understood. One afternoon, I suggested we take a short trip outside the city, a place where we could walk in nature, breathe fresh air, and reflect on everything we had been through. He hesitated at first, worried about the cost, but I insisted. "Sweetheart, it's not about money. It's about spending time together, making memories, and celebrating the bond we have rebuilt." We packed lightly, a small overnight bag each, and drove to a quiet countryside town. The air was crisp, and the hills stretched out before us in gentle waves of green. As we walked along a winding trail, we talked about our hopes and dreams for the future, things we had never shared before. He spoke about his ambitions, his fears, and the pressure he often felt to succeed. I spoke about my own desires, the small joys I had longed for, and the lessons I had learned from life and family. At one point, we paused at a small wooden bench overlooking a valley. The view was breathtaking, the sun casting golden light over the rolling hills. I turned to him and said softly, "Sweetheart, do you realize what a gift this journey has been? Not the money, not the letter, not even the shock of that morning, but the chance to truly understand each other, to rebuild our bond." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I know, Grandma. I was so afraid I'd ruined everything that morning. But now I see that it was part of a bigger lesson. I wanted to protect you, yes, but I also wanted to learn how to trust you with my intentions, and I'm so grateful that we found our way back." I felt tears prick my eyes, but they were tears of gratitude, of relief, of joy. "Sweetheart, life teaches us in mysterious ways. Sometimes the lessons come wrapped in pain, sometimes in confusion. But if we have patience and open hearts, they can lead to the most beautiful understanding. We spent the rest of the day walking along the trails, sharing stories from our childhoods, and even laughing at small mishaps along the way. I noticed how attentive he was, how he made sure I felt comfortable, and how his gestures, once misunderstood, now felt like the truest expressions of care. Each small act reminded me of that bag, that letter, and the money, not as shocking objects, but as symbols of the lengths he would go for my well-being. That evening, back at the small inn where we stayed, we sat by the window sipping tea and watching the sun set behind the hills. He turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Grandma, I've realized something. That morning with the bag taught me just as much as it taught you. I learned about the weight of love, about the courage it takes to be honest, and about the importance of trust. I hope I never forget that lesson." I smiled, my heart full. "And neither will I, sweetie. I've learned that love isn't always gentle, but it is always present. And sometimes the greatest gifts are hidden behind actions we may not immediately understand." The next morning, we explored the countryside further, visiting a small market and picking up handmade goods to bring home. He insisted on buying me a small ceramic vase, the kind I had admired but never purchased for myself. "For the flowers in your garden," he said softly. I felt a lump in my throat at the thoughtfulness behind such a small gift. It was a reminder that love doesn't always need to be grand or dramatic. It can be quiet, consistent, and deeply meaningful. Back at home, we settled into a new rhythm. I spent time arranging flowers in the vase, thinking about how each petal represented the care, attention, and love that had blossomed between us. My grandson and I continued working on small projects, shared quiet evenings reading, and occasionally revisited the letter he had written, reflecting on the lessons it contained. One afternoon, as we were sorting through old photographs, he paused and looked at me thoughtfully. "Grandma, do you remember that morning with the bag?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, I do, and I remember how it felt, but I also remember how it changed everything for us. It led us to this moment, to the understanding we have now." He smiled faintly. "I was so scared that day, scared you'd hate me, scared you'd never forgive me. But now I see that even the hardest moments can lead to the deepest connections. I hope I never forget that lesson." Tears filled my eyes again, but this time they were full of warmth and gratitude. "Sweetheart, I hope neither of us forgets. That day, as painful as it was, taught us both the true meaning of love, patience, and forgiveness." Over time, I began sharing our story quietly with friends and family, not to shock them, but to convey the lessons we had learned, that even in moments of pain, humiliation, or confusion, love can be present, guiding us, teaching us, and ultimately bringing us closer. I wanted them to know that relationships, even those strained by misunderstanding, could be repaired and strengthened if we take the time to understand the heart behind the actions. The money, once a source of shock, became a tool to enrich our lives in meaningful ways. We donated a portion to local causes, supported small family projects, and ensured that our home and surroundings were comfortable and welcoming. But more importantly, it became a reminder of the sacrifices we sometimes make for the people we love, and the ways those sacrifices, however disguised, reveal the depths of our care. And now, as I sit here reflecting on everything that has happened, from the humiliation of that morning to the revelation of the money and letter to the rebuilding of trust and love, I feel a profound sense of peace. Life has a way of teaching lessons we never expect, often in ways that hurt us before giving us the gift of understanding. My grandson has become more than just a family member to me. He is my teacher, my companion, and a constant reminder of the resilience of love. That morning, as painful as it was, became the beginning of something extraordinary, a bond that is stronger, more honest, and more loving than I could have ever imagined. Before I continue, if you've ever felt hurt by someone you love, but later discovered their actions came from a place of care, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my YouTube. Looking back now, that morning with the garbage bag feels almost surreal. I can still remember the shock, the sting of humiliation, and the way my heart had dropped to the floor. But more than that, I remember the letter, the money, and the quiet courage it took for my grandson to do something so drastic, yet ultimately so loving. That single act, which had seemed cruel in the moment, became the catalyst for a deeper, more meaningful connection between us. A bond built not only on love, but on understanding, trust, and forgiveness. In the weeks and months after our reconciliation, I began to notice changes in myself. I found myself more patient, more willing to listen before judging, and more aware of the hidden burdens carried by those I love. It was as if that one painful morning had cracked open my heart, allowing me to see the world and the people in it in a clearer, gentler light. I realized that love isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's hidden in sacrifice, in silence, in actions that at first seem inexplicable or even cruel. But when we take the time to look closer, we can see the heart beneath, and that heart is often stronger and more beautiful than we ever imagined. One afternoon, I invited my grandson over for tea. We sat together in the garden, the sun warm on our faces, the scent of jasmine and fresh earth surrounding us. He reached out and held my hand gently, his fingers laced through mine. "Grandma," he said softly, "I've been thinking a lot about that morning and about everything that's happened since. I want you to know that I'll always do my best to love you in a way you can feel, even if I don't always get it right the first time." I smiled, tears welling in my eyes. "Sweetheart, you've done more than enough. That morning was painful, yes, but it taught me something I might never have learned otherwise. It showed me your heart, your care, and your willingness to sacrifice, and it brought us to a place where I truly understand you, and I love you more than ever." We spent the afternoon reminiscing about our lives, laughing at small memories, and sharing the quiet contentment that comes from being fully understood and accepted. I realized that these moments, these simple, unremarkable acts of togetherness, were far more valuable than any amount of money, any grand gesture, or any dramatic revelation. The true gift was our connection, rebuilt and strengthened through understanding, forgiveness, and love. As evening fell, we sat together watching the sun dip below the horizon. I felt a deep sense of peace, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. The humiliation, the anger, the fear, they were all behind us now, replaced by a bond that was stronger and more resilient than ever. I thought about how easily life can be misunderstood, how often we misjudge the people closest to us, and how powerful it can be to pause, listen, and see beyond appearances. That night, I sat by my window with the letter in my hands. I read it once more, savoring the words, feeling the love and care that had been poured into it. My grandson had written with honesty, vulnerability, and a desire to protect me, even at the cost of temporary pain. And I realized that sometimes the most profound lessons in life come not from what is easy or comfortable, but from what challenges us, shakes us, and forces us to grow. In the days that followed, we continued to nurture our relationship. We cooked together, shared quiet evenings, and worked on small projects to make our home a place of warmth and comfort. Each act, no matter how ordinary, became infused with meaning because it was shared with someone's heart I finally understood. The money, once a shocking revelation, became a symbol of his care and foresight. But more importantly, it reminded me that love often comes with sacrifice, sometimes hidden and sometimes difficult to recognize at first. One afternoon, while arranging flowers in the new vase he had given me, I thought about the journey we had taken together, from humiliation and heartbreak to revelation, forgiveness, and trust. We had traveled a path that tested us, shaped us, and ultimately brought us closer than ever. I realized that life's challenges are often opportunities in disguise, moments that force us to confront our assumptions, embrace vulnerability, and recognize the depth of the love around us. I also reflected on the lessons I wanted to carry forward. First, that love is not always gentle. Sometimes it arrives in ways we cannot immediately understand. Second, that patience, empathy, and forgiveness are essential to sustaining relationships. And third, that the people we care about most may be acting from a place of love, even when their actions confuse or hurt us. Understanding that transformed my perspective on family, life, and human connection. Weeks later, my grandson and I hosted a small family gathering. Friends and relatives noticed the closeness between us, the ease of our interactions, and the warmth in our laughter. No one knew the full story of the garbage bag, the money, or the letter, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the bond we had rebuilt, the trust we had restored, and the love that now radiated between us. I realized then that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones we live, not the ones we tell. That evening, as the house quieted and guests departed, I sat beside him in the living room. He placed his hand on mine and said softly, "Grandma, I know I can't undo the hurt of that morning, but I hope you know I've always loved you, and I always will." I hugged him tightly, feeling the warmth of our connection, the years of misunderstanding dissolving in that embrace. "Sweetheart, I know, and I've always loved you too. That morning, as painful as it was, it showed me how much you cared, and it brought us to a place I will cherish forever. You've given me the greatest gift of all, understanding, trust, and your heart." As I watched him smile, I realized that the garbage bag, the money, and the letter were never truly about material things. They were symbols, symbols of love, sacrifice, vulnerability, and the courage it takes to show care in a world that doesn't always recognize it. And in that recognition, I found a depth of connection I had longed for my entire life. Now, when I think about that morning, I no longer feel anger or humiliation. I feel gratitude for my grandson, for the lessons we learned, and for the opportunity to rebuild a bond that had been tested but never broken. Life has a way of teaching us what matters most, often through moments that seem painful or confusing at first. And I have learned that love, patience, empathy, and forgiveness are essential to sustaining relationships. In the quiet of my home, surrounded by the evidence of a life rebuilt and a relationship restored, I finally understood the full meaning of that shocking day. The bag, the money, the letter were not just events. They were lessons, love letters in disguise, and the ultimate proof that even when life hurts, it can lead us to beauty, understanding, and an unbreakable bond with those we cherish most. And as I sit here now reflecting on everything, I can say with certainty that my heart is full, my trust is restored, and my love for my grandson has grown deeper than I ever thought possible. We have survived misunderstanding, fear, and pride and come out the other side stronger, closer, and more aware of what truly matters. Love, I have learned, is patient. Love is sacrificial. Love sometimes hides in the actions we don't immediately understand, but when we see it, truly see it, it transforms everything. And that is the story of the day a garbage bag changed my life and the life of my grandson forever.